Oh, you must be quite tired by now. And I feel tired already, although I haven't done anything yet. I'm the final speaker, so please bear with me. At first, Mr. Takenaka talked about Tokyo, but I am active in a remote island area, and I don't feel too good about Tokyo. The reason why is because there's too much centralization. Even cultural aspects are all centralized, and that means that they are exploiting a lot of things from the regional areas, such as the laborers, nature, and even culture. And so therefore, I rebel against that. And so I have decided to exile myself to an island, and I'm carrying out a project in a remote island. With the Tokyo Olympics, Tokyo may well become a wonderful place, and that's a wonderful thing. But I think also that we have to think about the regional areas of Japan. I do believe that Tokyo Olympics will be a wonderful event, and Tokyo Electrical Power Company had the Fukushima nuclear power plant accident, and there's the reality of people coming from that region. So it's necessary to take consideration those factors as I go ahead with my presentation. Here is the area of the Seto Inland Sea in Japan. On the east side, there is a place called Inujima. It's a truly small island. The population is about only 40 persons, and there is no bridges, so it's quite inconvenient to get there. It just happened that I learned about this island. At that time, I was living in New York, and there was a dynamic art market in New York, and there was a lot of big transactions regarding artworks. And so there seems to be a conspiracy between art and capital. And I had doubts about such a situation. So I wanted something that could become my life work, which would fulfill my soul. And so therefore I searched around Japan and I encountered this island. This used to be a place where there was a copper refinery during the Meiji era. The Meiji era was the time when Japan copied Western culture and modernized itself. And there was a lot of things that Japan gained, but at the same time there was a lot of things that Japan lost. And there are ruins of that period to be found in this island. This is a photograph of those old days. There are many laborers working there. And there must have been tremendous pollution there at that time. And now this is abandoned and in ruins. When we talk about the Meiji era, there was the process of modernization taking place, and most Asian countries became colonies, but Japan avoided that fate. But at the same time, we were on the course to war. And there's a lot of industrial waste that was about to be disposed in this site of the ruins. It may be construction waste or so on, and there was a lot of such waste brought to this site. And when it comes to the Seto Inland Sea, if you look at it from some distance, it's quite beautiful. But if you get close, then you see exploitation of nature, and you see that a lot of waste is being disposed in this area. And in this island, there are several interesting elements that I discovered. Since the Edo era, there was a lot of stones being cut here, because gigantic rocks could be found here. The island was famous for that, and taking ebb tide taking advantage of ebb tide, it was possible to carry those large rocks to Tokyo. And there was also a byproducts of very metallic, heavy bricks that could be found. And there are ruins, but there's also the people's lives, and there are shrines, and there's the worship of the countless number of gods. And then there was also the ruins of a power plant. There were a lot of fossil fuels that were used in the past. But now they're trying to reuse this by taking advantage of natural energy sources. So the island as a whole looks like this. There's the ruins, and there are a lot of remnants from the Edo era, and there's also ruins of the refinery. And I wanted to make the island as a whole a work of art. Now the ruins could possibly remind me of the myth of Icarus. Icarus tried to escape from a labyrinth, and so created wings and jumped from a tower. But then Icarus approached the sun, and his wings melted and fell down. It's often used as over-reliance on technology or arrogance of humans. There was a 17th century relief, and the idea of Icarus came to me, and I wanted to establish an art site here. This has already been completed. It took about 13 years, but it has now been completed. There was a collaboration with architects, and in fact, there was high economic growth in Japan, where there were a lot of museums made during the development, but there were a lot of architects and fashion designers that became famous, but it was quite difficult for artists to be active worldwide. This must be due to the economy. Art is something that is often incompatible with economic activities. But I thought that art was the only type of work that will allow me to have a critical spirit. So I thought that art museums in Japan are just decorations for architects, and I felt dissatisfied with that, and so I thought that I had to make my own art museum. So consequently, there was the concept of the artist in this project, and there needs to be a collaboration between art and architecture for this to be realized. This is in a rural area of Okayama, so it wasn't possible to call upon a famous architect from the very beginning. And for the construction company as well as the architect, I tried to find local people to foster the human resources locally. We thought about this with the sponsor company, and it's quite difficult for the local construction companies to understand art, and architects were not knowledgeable about art, so there was a lot of difficulty. But there's no electricity used for this architecture at all. There's no machine room, there's no air conditioning either. The source of energy is from the draft that is used. We're taking advantage of the draft effect that comes from the rooftops, and there's a lot of air that is used, and there is a flow of airs. You may think, so what, just because you use the chimneys like that? But this is linked to the myth of Icarus. And we have the labyrinth, and then we have air coming in, and people are able to walk through with air being provided. And when we talk about Icarus, here is Yukio Mishima. When Mishima got on a fighter jet, he wrote a poem about Icarus. And when we talk about Yukio Mishima, I wanted to include that aspect that is the spirit of an art museum, because in the course of modernization of Japan, there was the ruins of the Meiji era, and also I wanted to look at Mishima. Post-war Japan focused on economic matters and money and neglected culture, and yet during that period, Mishima criticized and even carried out a performance in which he committed suicide. He was an artist. So I wanted to add the element of Mishima here. And it just happened to be that I discovered that the abandoned home of Mishima was to be demolished. I wanted to take advantage of this and make it a work of art. It was in Tokyo, but this was transported to a rural area. And this is how it looked like inside. And so these were the only things that were remaining from the house. And so we decided to use this as art museum materials. This is a 50-ton stone. And the idea of using this as a piece of art is something that could be done in Inujima. And so we took advantage of these kind of elements. And in the art museum, we have this kind of rock of 50 tons being placed. As for the inside of the art museum, there's water that has been placed. And there was a small library of the home of Mishima that is hung from the ceiling. And there is a black-colored sun reflected in the water. Now, I'll run out of time if I go into too much detail, so I'd like to move ahead. But there's a toilet. That was something that was used by Mishima. People who are familiar with art history may recognize this. It's like an homage to Duchamp's works as well. And there was a room like this. All the rooms in the art museum had the reproduction of the 6-mat or the 8-mat or the 4-mat rooms of Mishima's home. And there's also wood that is used. And there's also a room to shut wind out. This is a 6-mat room. And through projection, text is projected. And this is a famous photograph. MacArthur and the Emperor are in this photograph. This symbolizes the relationship between US and Japan after World War II. And it has the words, "Why did your majesty decide to become a mortal?" So it questions why the emperor decided to become a mortal. The emperor should have remained an immortal. But this was betrayed, according to the thoughts of Mishima. And so the dead are presumed to have spoken those words of, "Why did your majesty become a mortal?" And there is a manifesto that was written by Mishima before he died. And he cried out against the post-war Japan. And so you see this. It's like the Pandora's box in Greek mythology. And in the center, you see the bag that Mishima used for vacations. This is the situation of his incident. Another project I'd like to talk about. This is in a western island. Here, a mountain was carved out to reclaim land for an airport. And there have been some islands that have completely disappeared so that it can be used to reclaim land elsewhere. And so we see that between the center of Japan and the regional areas, there's a tremendous disparity. And I keenly felt this. And if we look at an island as a life form, we have decided to move forward on that basis with a project. Well, 13 minutes seems to have passed. At any rate, this kind of study was carried out, and we tried to recreate vacant houses and created a gallery. And there's another island where we took advantage of abandoned homes, and there was self-renovation carried out, and this was changed and converted into an art museum. And here is a toilet gallery, and there's a lot of works where there's a lot of gas exhaust that you could not really display in a other art museum. So these are things that a traditional art museum would not be able to do. Naturally, many people had lived there in the past. There are movie theaters, but now it's been abandoned. Well, we're renovating this and putting works of art there. Apparently, the film that was shown in this movie theater when it was about to close down was Godzilla vs. Mothra, and so therefore, we showed that film by gathering the people in the island to the movie theater. And we have now artworks brought over here, and I want to do a lot of different things in this island. This is Onomichi. From Onomichi, there are ships going to various islands, and here there are warehouses that are not used, and they do not fulfill anti-seismic requirements, so they're abandoned. But that's a waste, because if white cube museums are looked at, it doesn't stimulate imagination. But then we have vast space here, and you can open up holes. You can do anything in a place like this. And you can't create art if you're not allowed to strike a nail into the walls of an art museum. And because it doesn't have anti-seismic measures, we were told that we can't bring an unspecified number of people. Then maybe people could just glance in. And so therefore we have decided to make it into a place where you glance into and take advantage of peeking into something. We wanted to look at the humiliating parts of Japan. And so we have gigantic works of art being exhibited. There's Haraguchi, an artist's work. And this shows the wing of a fighter plane that was used in the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And because of, there was also a work using Article 9 of the Constitution of Japan, and so a lot of things that could normally not be done in a art museum was carried out. Right now in Yokohama, there's a retrospective of mine at BankART, and it's not like a conventional art museum, but rather it's an art center where a warehouse has been modified. And right now there's an exhibition of my works, so please visit. And in regard to the Icarus labyrinth, this has been reproduced. In Inujima, you see the genuine work, but there's a lot of architectural constraints. There's a lot of cumbersome steps that needs to be done, and there was a lot of artistic things that could not be carried out, but I've been able to freely carry this out here. And so you can see that from the ceiling, you can see lighting, and you can see the labyrinth that he went through before Icarus flew off. And so there's a labyrinth, a maze, and it looks like a straight line, but it's actually a zigzag pattern. And what you see in the front is the sky. And there's also the poem of Icarus that has been engraved. This was written by Mishima. And normally in an art museum you couldn't do anything like this, but we got a lot of abandoned waste material gathered, and we created a large eyeball. The image is that of Godzilla. Godzilla became a subject of a Hollywood movie, but Godzilla originally became a gigantic creature as a result of a hydrogen bomb experiment, and it is representing the souls of the people who died in the Pacific. Well, I've run out of time. I'm sorry. Thank you.